Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Michael Donnelly. I'm an alcoholic. And it is a pleasure and a privilege to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. The thing that I want to remember, hopefully every day for the rest of my life, is that this is a gift. And many of us do not make it here. And most of us who make it here don't stay here. And I think that's a shame. Because if the big book is accurate, Alcoholics Anonymous works almost 100% of the time for those who follow the path. And I was fortunate enough where I had a sponsor when I first came in. He was deliberate in the path that I would follow. He was not mean, don't mean to imply that. He was compassionate and very loving and very understanding, but he was direct. And he told me some things that changed my life. I grew up on the south side of Chicago. My father was a police lieutenant. My dad was and absolutely is my hero. He served 2 tours of duty in Korea. When the war ended, he stayed on with the Air Force and worked down in San Antonio, Texas, where he was a TI, which is kind of a drill instructor for the Air Force. And he was a great man. And I was 6 years old. He went off to work, as he did every day. And I didn't come home. And 2 weeks later, we were at his funeral. Hit my mother pretty hard, hit all of us, obviously, pretty hard. I was 6. I didn't really understand what was going on. But it caused absolute chaos in our family. It changed the dynamic of everything in our family. My dad was, I just wish you could have met him. He was the kind of guy that he'd come home from work and because of his military background, he'd make sure his pants were pressed for the next day. And he'd get out the Shinola and he'd spit shine his shoes and his holster and where he kept his cuffs, and it was like a mirror off his shoes, you know, and that before he became a lieutenant, when he was plainclothes, when he had his police officer's hat on, there was a little plastic brim, and that was polished to beat the nines too. He was a great man, and we were loved and we knew it. We were going to be safe because he was around and we knew it. And he took care of my mom, took care of my sister and I, made us feel loved and important. And I'm very grateful for that. Again, most people didn't have that. A lot of people didn't have that. I don't know about most. A lot of people didn't have that. I had that. My mother was a caterer. She's an entrepreneur in Chicago. When my dad passed away, she decided that she would give up her career, be home with us kids, and she sacrificed. She was 33 years old, beautiful woman. Her husband had just passed away, and she was at home with us every night. It wasn't a peaceful home. She turned to alcohol to kill the pain of losing her husband, raising 2 young kids by herself, but she was there. She was home. And I'm, again, very appreciative of that. She sent us to school in Chicago, private school in Chicago. She worked her tail off to make sure that she kept us out of the Chicago public school system. I was a nut job to begin with. If you'd have put me through that, you may have a different speaker tonight. I don't know if I'd have made it through high school. And I went through this process of really getting very angry as a young kid. It seemed that by the time I was 12 years old, if you were an authority figure in my life or just in general, I despised you for some reason. Didn't like you at all. I didn't like the power that you had over me at all. And I would rebel against it. And I was raised to be a nice guy, so I wouldn't be overtly mean to you. I would actually be pretty kind, but I would still manipulate the living daylights out of you to get what I wanted. My goal was to get what I wanted, when I wanted it, as much as I wanted, and I would move you out of the way to get whatever that was. I went on to high school, and I started drinking when I was 16 years old. I had done some drugs between the ages of 12 and 14. But I met this other thing that would be a constant factor in my life in decision-making. They're called brunettes. I was 16. She was about this tall, man, and wow. And I was really afraid to talk to girls. I was just completely intimidated by them. And so my thing was to get around them sort of with friends and listen to what they were saying. And when they were talking, I'd listen to them, and then I would sort of pick up details of their conversations. I'd go up to them later and start a conversation based on what I'd eavesdropped from them. And then they would think, wow, we have this connection. Yeah, we sure do. And we're hoping to advance that connection, frankly. Another story completely. But so at 16, I learned to do this, And in overhearing one of her conversations with her friends, I heard her say this: losers do drugs. And I thought, now I have a decision to make. My first big decision in life went something like this. Chronically eating Hostess cupcakes and staring at black like Jimi Hendrix posters, or a good-looking brunette? Well, I'm an alcoholic, but I'm not a fool. I chose the brunette and just moved right into drinking. And I drank a few times during that, area of time of my age of 12 to 16, but it wasn't like it was later. When I was 16 years old, and that was my sole source of getting fed to find power, to find life, to find peace, my life changed. I was fundamentally different after 2 or 3 beers than I was before that. I had a personality change. I think I drank differently than my friends did, even back then. It was disguised, sort of, because every 16-year-old on the south side of Chicago who's Irish Catholic is supposed to sort of sow some wild oats, right? And that's, maybe true or may not be true. All I know is that I felt deeply broken long before that. And a couple of drinks, shot of Jack, a couple of beers, fixed me. It made me feel different. It made me feel complete. It made me feel whole. Now, I don't think my friends were like that. I don't know why. My sister's not like that. My sister and I went to this bar on Western Avenue on the south side of Chicago, a great little Irish pub called Cork and Kerry, because there was a couple of bands that were going to be playing that night. She actually went to listen to the bands. A little strange. We were there for fundamentally different reasons. The bands were my excuse to be there. She actually went to listen. It took her an hour and a half to finish a Bartles and James wine cooler one night. An hour and a half. I went on to college after I got through Mount Carmel High School, and my freshman year went pretty good from what I've been told, and my sophomore year was not so good. I left because they were going to kick me out because I didn't have any good grades. I would get up somewhere around the afternoon, somewhere 1 o'clock in the afternoon or so, and take a shower, go down to the cafeteria, have some lunch. Always was late for lunch. There was a certain schedule that you had to be there in order to eat lunch, and I was always late, and I'd always kid and flirt with the older ladies that did the food in the back so that they could get me a plate, and they always did. They were nice. Play some basketball, dink around for a couple hours, and I'd go to work. And work was I was a bouncer at the local bar. And if you were an employee there, then you drank for free while you were there. Bar closed during the weekdays at about midnight, on the weekends 2 o'clock in the morning. College bars attract the locals because of co-eds. I was smart enough to know that no matter what the charge was at the front door, these locals were going to come in. And since I was at the front door, I set the fee of $5. Now, back in 1985, if you had 60 or 70 people coming in at $5 a pop when there really wasn't a cover, you were doing okay financially. I haven't found them all to make amends yet, but still working on that. they would just come in droves, you know, and if you didn't have a student ID, if I was at the door, then you had to pay $5. I was one of these drunks that never wanted the night to end. So I had all this cash on me. So we'd go to this place called the Wild Hammer in Joliet. And I would buy drinks for everybody all night. Everybody liked me, believe that or not. Everybody liked me, till later in the evening. Then they kind of pulled away a little bit. But then when the bar closed there, then it was always like Denny's restaurant, or let's go to White Castle, or let's do something, or let's go back to the dorm, or let's get a package to go, or I just never wanted tomorrow to come. I never wanted tomorrow to come. Whatever it took. After I drank my way out of school, I moved back home with my mom, who by this time I could not stand. Hated this woman. At the time, I could give you a serious list as to the reasons why, but none of them are valid, as I see it today. But at the time, they seemed very real, very real. I got a couple of jobs here and there, finally got the next job, and then the next job, and finally I got the job, right? And this was going to show the rest of the world that I was somebody. When Bill talks in his story about I had arrived, that's where I felt like I was. I was 23 years old. I got a job with a major international company. I had a lot of responsibility, no degree. Everybody I worked with was well educated, and I was kind of the idiot drunk. But I could sell. And I could sell for one reason. I was born to lie. And I sold and lied and sold and lied. And I got a promotion and did some different things and moved up, and life was absolutely spinning out of control. Decided to put myself into treatment one night. I was sitting next to a brunette, and I was in the middle of a beer. And band was playing, Fat John the bartender was there, you know, slow ice caps dripping down the bottle of the beer. It was a beautiful evening. And in the middle of the beer, I heard, "Mike, you're an alcoholic. You better do something about your drinking." I put that beer down, pie plate-eyed. I was scared to death. And I had sort of known I had a drinking problem. I had called AA a couple of times before this, but in Chicago on the hotline, they want your name and your phone number so they can have an alcoholic call you back. And I thought that was a complete violation of the traditions, and just didn't think that was appropriate at all. Because it is an anonymous program, you know, and what do you need my name for? So, but I looked at her, and she looked back at me and says, "You want to get out of here?" I said, "Yeah, I'm going to treatment." I'm not sure that's exactly what she had in mind, and I got in the car and I drove to this hospital, Christ Community Hospital on 95th Street. Of course, being a good drunk, I park on the wrong side of the building and I have to walk through the job site. If you know anything about hospitals, they're chronically doing construction work. And they have these huge concrete cylinders that are diagonally placed in the ground to hold up the building. And I was in my suit from work because I'm pretending to be important and honest. And I slid off this concrete slab and kind of scratched my head a little bit, and it was rainy out, and a security guard comes by and he says, "What's going on down there?" I said, I'm going to treatment." You know, great. You know, he gets on his mind. "Lou, we got another 41 down here. Lou, another 41. So him and Lou come by and drag me out and wipe me off a little bit, you know, and I'm filling out the paperwork. And I'm passing out as I'm filling out the paperwork. I get nudged, and finally it's my turn to go see the social worker, and so I go into this office. And this gentleman begins to question me about my drinking. And I think, you got some nerve, you know? I mean, told you I'm going to treatment, like, back off, all right? And so I lied to him. Literally every question he threw at me, I lied to him, and he still thought I had a drinking problem, which was weird. And so I ended up getting into detox that night, and there was this beautiful woman there. I couldn't tell you her name, but she was the most angelic person I had seen in my life up to that point. She was this wonderful nurse. She's an African-American lady, and I laid in this bed just weeping in agony about my life. And she sat next to me that whole night, and she just rubbed my forearm. And she said, "It's going to be okay, sweetie. It's going to be okay." And I knew in my heart this time was different. I had made other promises. I had made other attempts to quit drinking. I had made many, decisions to stop this. And yet I had failed. But I knew, with her sitting next to me, I knew this was going to work. The next morning when I got up, I met another resident of the detox ward. It was a big ward, and you have kind of those curtain that align your beds, you know, so you're like sort of in your own room, but you're really not. And she was coming by, and she was lifting up her gown. You could tell she wasn't home at all, mentally. And an orderly came by and put her back in bed. And he said, don't mind her. I'm sorry. She's a heroin addict. She lives on the streets, and she doesn't have a job. And she panhandles all day. Men throw change at her feet, and she exposes herself now and then to get enough money to go buy some smacks so she can get through the day. And I just thought, wow, I'm so glad she's here. This is a great place for her to be. And you know, if I ever get that bad, I'm coming back. You know, for some reason in my mind, I could make other situations different, and then that equated to me that I was an alcoholic. Came to my first meeting, I heard people had DUIs. You know, I never got a DUI. Right? I came to meetings and I heard people were divorced. I'd never been divorced. Nobody would marry me. That's another issue. It's a totally separate thing. You know? I had never been fired from a job. I had quit all the jobs in the meeting where they say either you quit or you're fired, but I had quit. That was different. Never been to prison, been to jail. Again, different, 2-syllable word, 1-syllable word, totally different deal. I had all these differences. They were killing me. So I had this job, and a guy who worked with me was sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, thank God, for 7 years. And he wasn't just not drinking. Brian was an actual member of Alcoholics Anonymous. One of those unique souls that carries a message of depth and weight so it can hold people like my interest. One of those individuals who cares enough to tell people that they're going to die by just going to meetings. One of those people that cared enough to get in my face and tell me the truth about recovery. I love that man. I owe that man everything. He caught me in the hall one day, and I was legitimately thinking, this is it. I need to find a way out of this. And I remember contemplating that so deeply because I didn't want my mother to know. My mother had lost enough in her life, and if her son had killed himself, that would be just devastating to my mother. And I loved her too much to do that. So I kept trying to think, should I drive like into a wall? How can I make this look like I didn't really do it? Brian comes down the hall and he says, "You all right?" And I said, "No, dude, I'm not all right." And he said, "Why don't you come to a meeting with me tonight?" And I really don't remember all that dialogue. I don't remember that conversation, except I showed up at that meeting, and it was the Lamont Oaks meeting in South Side of Chicago. And they have a newcomers meeting before the regularly scheduled AA meeting. There's a little guy named Frank and some other people, and they walk up and down that aisle, and they look at you in the eye and they ask you questions. I'm not really into that, frankly. I kind of want to be in the back where no one can see me, you know. And you sat in a red chair in this meeting if you were a new guy. Okay? And a new guy was defined as 1 year or less. So you sat in these red chairs. And after the newcomers meeting, you took your red chair and you walked it into the regularly scheduled AA meeting in the gymnasium, and you met about 300 to 350 alcoholics who were sober more than a year. And the reason that you had a red chair was so that they could come up to you and introduce themselves to you. It's a 6-week waiting list to do coffee at this place. They think it's a privilege, not a hassle, right? Unbelievable people. So I refused to go to the regularly scheduled AA meeting because I wasn't going to join any cult. And Brian reassured me that they would be there if I ever needed them. So 6 weeks later, after probably not drawing too many sober breaths during that 6-week period, I came back on August 27th of 1991, pleased God to stay in Alcoholics Anonymous. And they were still there. They were still there. They were still smiling. And they were still pretty forceful about what they thought recovery was. And I'm really grateful for that too. They were a very energetic, very passionate group, and one of the things that they did was they had an old-timers versus newcomers softball game. And as a newcomer, you got this jersey, and as an old-timer, you got this jersey, and it had class of whatever on there, right? So the one side of the bench had, I don't know, 80, 100 people, all with class of 91 on their jerseys. And the other bench had class of 52, and class of 79, and class of 81, and class of 90, right? We all played this game, and it didn't matter what you hit, you were always safe, right? You know, none of that strike three stuff. Could be 18 or 20. We really don't care. It was great. It was a blast. At the end of that game, and I think this was the day that I joined you. I think this was the moment that I joined you. At the end of that game, all the children that were watching their parents play softball came on the field. Everybody in the stands that were friends came on the field. All the players got around this border of this field. We all held hands and we said the Lord's Prayer. There were hundreds of us. And I got out of my mouth this much of the Lord's Prayer. And I had to open my eyes and look around at this. I thought to myself, who are these people? These are the kinds of people that I always wished I was, but I could never be. I can't believe they're doing this. Like, it was just so beautiful. I think that was the day, even though I'd been to a lot of meetings up to that game, and been sober up to that game, I think that was the day I decided, you know what? You got something that I need. And you've been encouraging me now for weeks and months to actually get involved and do it. I think I'm going to do it. Today I became a member, in that sense, of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm really grateful for that day. It wasn't 2 weeks later, and I got transferred to South Dakota. And went to this meeting. I was living in a terrible hotel. I mean, if you ever go to South Dakota, do not stay at this place. This is a bad place. I'm making all kinds of money. I have no cash. I got none. Right? I mean, in AA, we learned some things, right? I had a good teacher on money, and he said, if you spend $200 or $300 more than you make a month, it doesn't matter how much you make a month, you're going to be broke. I mean, really, the wisdom of AA is unbelievable. That's astonishing. Keen insight for me. So I'm staying at this flea-bitten hotel. Brian is Western Unioning me money. I get my check, I run to the currency exchange, no bank accounts. No bank accounts because I hadn't filed federal income tax in about 4 years. And I'm Western Unioning him money back, pay him back. And I meet this guy at a meeting, and he was a joke. And I remember thinking, you're a joke. There's no red chairs here, right? You have one guy who shows up to make coffee, and you picked him right when he walked in. There's no 6-week waiting list. This thing's a joke here. Brian said, go to another meeting. I said, okay, I went to another meeting. They were jokes too, by the way. None of that's true. It's a newcomer mindset, right? So he says, I said, this place is terrible. I'm going to move back. I'm going to quit. I'm just going to move back and get sober with you guys. He said, no. That's not the deal. Just go to another meeting and get somebody's phone number while you're there. So I said, all right, so I go to the meeting, get a phone number, come back, call him. How was the meeting? It was great. This was a great meeting. He said, really? That's interesting. I said, yeah, it's a great meeting. He said, did you get a phone number? I said, yeah. He said, what's his name? I said, well, Tracy. He said, no. Find a man and get his phone number. Oh, okay. So I wind up at this place called Southside Alcoholics Anonymous. I meet a guy there named Joe. Joe had a sponsor named Bill. And Joe took me under his wing. And Joe helped me so much. Joe was a rock for me in that sense. I would come to meetings, I would look for Joe, and if he was there, I knew I was going to be okay. No idea why, I just knew that was going to be okay. The fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous encouraged me, and still does today, so much to be more than just a meeting goer. Joe would have none of that, right? Joe fed me my first Joe and Charlie tapes that he bought from a Gopher Steak guy, right? And he said, I want you to listen to these, I want you to listen to these, I want you to listen to these. Joe and Charlie, and Joe, my Joe, walked me through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I am so grateful that he was that precise in what he thought his job was as a sponsor. He said, I'll be your friend, that's great, but that's not being a sponsor. He was very clear that in his mind, that being a sponsor meant that he walked the people that he sponsored through the 12 steps. That's what he thought a sponsor was. He said, my opinions are vast. Some are sane, some are not so sane. But if you work the steps, you'll get sanity. And so my job isn't to give you all of my insight and all of my wisdom all the time. I share it when you need it. But primarily, your job is to walk through the 12 steps. Okay, that made sense. They were on the wall. I knew they were important. I had heard that at the Red Chair meeting. When we got into discussing step 1, Joe took an angle on this thing that I had been avoiding like the plague. He said the problem with alcoholism is that it looks like it's a drinking problem. It's not. Mike, it's a drinking solution. See, the problem, Mike, is that you have a problem when you're sober. And that problem manifests itself in almost every single area of your life. It's called self-centeredness. You're afraid. You are scared to death. And you pretend not to be. So you lie. That's what pretending not to be means, lying. You're covering up everything. You're pretending to be something you're not all the time. You're always on stage. We have a little bit I want you to read about being an actor. He read it. None of it applied. And it all applied. We know that. It all applied. Joe taught me that alcoholism is a threefold disease. That yes, it's physical. Absolutely. If I drink, the allergy to alcohol kicks off in me, the phenomenon of craving develops, and I am passing through the well-known stages of a spree, whether I remember it in a blackout or not. That's a problem. But Joe was really clear that the bigger problem is what was going on inside of me. Joe was really clear that if we didn't fix the inside of Mike, he would eventually go back to the drink. And when Joe would talk to me like that, I would try on the outside to be tough and pretend like it wasn't resonating with me. Because it didn't seem cool. It just seemed like, woo, spiritual stuff, right? And I was a South Side Chicago kid. Like, we're not woo-woo, you know? We might be ayo, but we ain't woo-woo, you know? Joe was very clear that there were three parts to this thing. He said, Mike, you have a mind that lies to you. Truth ain't in you, kid. Your mind lies to you, and your only response to your lying mind, Mike, is this. Tell me another one. Tell me another one. Tell me another one. Because as much as my mind lied to me, I also did not want to deal with reality. I enjoyed living in my fog. It's a pretty comfortable place. Not really. On the surface, it seems that way. I tell you, when I would go home and put my head on my pillow, trains of thoughts about myself and what I was really like, what a liar I was, what a con man I was, what a pretender, what many, many more foul words than I'd ever used from an AA podium would run through my head about myself. And I believed it. It was true. That's how I act. That's how I lived. I hated that. What Joe said is those lies stem from the third problem. You're in a wrong place with God, pal. you're in a totally wrong place with God. This is a spiritual disease, Mike. And if you really want recovery, you're going to have to focus on the spiritual solution. Not drinking isn't going to help someone like you. Trying to do mental gymnastics to talk yourself out of negative thinking, Mike, is not going to do it for you. You lack one thing: power. Mike, now that you're sober and all those trains of thoughts are running through your head and you're trying to control it and it's not happening, didn't that happen to you when you were drinking? You know what? He was right. I was as powerless over all that stuff as I was everything that happened after that first drink. So he said, we got to get down to brass tacks. Okay. He said, what I want you to do is go to the big book, and I want you to go to page 47, and I want you to write down 40 spiritual terms in that book, and you define them. Because the big book says that we do that on page 47. It says we go through the book. We do not let any prejudice we may have against spiritual terms deter us from honestly asking ourselves what they mean to us. What does that mean to me? What does prayer mean to me? What does meditation mean to me? What does money mean to me? What does sex mean to me? What does fear mean to me? What does forgiveness mean? These are all spiritual terms in the book. So I did that. Okay, good enough. Now we're going to move on to step 3. We had a lot of talks about step 3 and what that meant. Joe said, you're going to sit in a ton of meetings, and during step 3, when you're trying to figure it out and trying to do this deal, he said, listen to everything that everybody says, but the one thing that I want you to focus on right now as a new person in recovery is this. Mike, for me and you in our relationship, we're going to define step 3 as this. When you say amen at the end of the 3rd step prayer, that means we're doing step 4. That's what step 3 is going to mean for us. That it's a commitment to work through the rest of the steps. I said, okay. So we did that. I looked at my fears, my resentments, my sex conduct. Wasn't pretty. Wasn't pretty. Very selfish. Full of fear. I was a scared little kid. I went and gave my 5th step. Joe said, you're going to take an hour after the 5th step and you're going to go somewhere and you're going to sit and you're going to let God touch you. And you're going to ask yourselves those questions. You hiding anything? It's not stated that way, but that's kind of what he told me they meant. Stones properly in place. Try to make mortar without sand. Are you lying or are you in? So I went to this little park down the street from the AA member that I gave my first 5th step to. And I sat in that park for an hour. And I got to tell you, nothing superior, supreme, nothing super spirit, no woo-woo happened. Right? But this did happen. When I left that park after that hour, I used to think God was close to me after I took the 3rd step and while I was writing the 4th, because I needed to pray through those things because there's prayers in 4. I felt like God was close to me. But after that hour, I knew he was. And that might not sound like a big deal to you, but I was convinced that a loving, honest, good, righteous God could never love a person who did the things that I did. How could he? How could a God who is love love something that was so anti-love? It didn't make sense to me. When I left that park, I knew he did. My hair didn't stand on end. I didn't go hand out Bibles in an airport or anything like that. No disrespect, if any of you have had that experience. I just mean that's not what happened to me. I just left knowing that he was with me in a way I didn't know when I went there. I got on my hands and knees and we said the 6th and 7th step prayers together about my defects of character. Now there's a whole lot more in 6 and 7. We don't have time to get into it, but that's how we took it when we first started. And he said, now your job is to do 8 and 9. So we got up off our knees, we went to my 4th step, and we wrote down the names of the people that I had harmed, the institutions I needed to pay back, including the federal government, right? Slowly but surely I made those amends. And he would say, Mike, you went out of your way to harm these people. You went out of your way to get your will done. You need to go out of your way to make these right. Because I would hear in meetings, I'm like, Joe, I was in a 9-step meeting, and I heard that God is going to ordain this contact between me and the people that I hurt. I mean, there was a guy there the other day, and he was talking about how he was out at a pig feed, and there was a guy there, and some pig salesman came over, and the guy he hadn't seen him in 20 years, and oh, God's going to ordain this. He said, Mike, did you hurt anyone in South Dakota? I said, no. He said, where'd you hurt people? Chicago? He goes, well, if you think God is going to load up 17 buses of all of the people you hurt and drop them off at the mall while you're happen to walk through, good luck on that. So what he'd do is he'd throw me in the car. And he'd say, Friday night you drive to Chicago. Saturday you make amends. Sunday you get back because you got to work on Monday. If you have vacation time and you want to make a bunch, you do that. I did that. And I hunted down these people in that 8th step. And I got to tell you, I thought saying the 3rd step with Joe was like a big deal. I thought that hour after that 5th step was a big deal. I got to tell you, the freedom comes in 8 and 9. For me. Because it's different. It's not ethereal. It's practical. That man hated me. And that man just told me he didn't. And he forgave me. And I'd look in the mirror and go, you're a thief, you're a liar, you're a cheat, you're a manipulator, you're a user, you're a con man. And suddenly, when I made all those things right, I didn't need positive affirmation. I needed to make right what I made wrong. And then I could look in the mirror and it didn't say thief, because I paid back what I stole. It might say repentant thief every now and then, but it doesn't say thief. I'll take that. Okay? It doesn't say bigot anymore. Right? It doesn't say user anymore. Unbelievable. I came here to get sober and you gave me new life. I came here to not live the life I lived before, and you said, not good enough, Mike. 3rd step says you're going to be reborn. You get a brand new life. Joe told me that God didn't want a damaged, bandaged up Mike. He wanted a brand new Mike. That what he was going to do to me was going to make something completely different than what he had before. That's amazing. Along this road of making amends, there was a gentleman that I had lied to. I talked about work and how I had stole from people, and I manipulated a contract to get... See, I'm one of these guys, if I'm in a contest, I have to win. It's not that I want to win, it's that I have to win. And so, it's not a defect. Don't kid yourself. It's a gift. It's a gift. Yeah. And so, yeah, right. And so I'm in this contest, which means I have to win. Because if I'm second, that means I'm nothing. I don't know why that is. In my head, that's how that was. So I go to this customer, I say, here's the contract, this is the deal, blah, 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 sign here. He trusted me. Coming up for renewal. I suddenly have had all these experiences in 8 and 9. I've had all these experiences in 4 and 5. Said those prayers in 6 and 7 endlessly. I can't do this. I can't do this. So I go to my sponsor. I say, what do I do? He said, you placed your company in jeopardy. You go to your company. Big Book says if you're going to do something, you got to secure the rights of others if you put them in jeopardy. Okay. So I called my boss. And I said, guess what I did? She goes, I don't know. So I told her. She goes, why'd you do that? I said, I got to win. It's not good enough for her. So she says, can't you just tell them that this year the rules have changed and you don't have to buy all that stuff that you threw in last year's contract? And I said, I suppose I could, but I'm not gonna. And she says, well, if that's the case, then if he sues us, you and I never had this conversation. Never heard about it. Didn't know anything about it. So I call my sponsor, and I'm like ready to cry. I'm ready to lose it. Because I think that when I grow spiritually, everyone should genuflect to me. I mean, they should all respect the fact I'm trying to be different. Oh my gosh, right? So he says, go make the amend. So, ironically, another Joe. So I call up Joe and I say, Joe, I lied to you on this contract. Or can I meet with you face to face? He said, sure. Renewal time? I said, yeah. There are a couple things I want to cover with you, though. So we sat down in his office. And I said, Joe, last year on the contract, I lied to you. And I put some stuff in there that didn't need to be in there. And it's not right, and I owe you some money. I owe you $750. That's how much you overpaid last year. And he said, well, why are you here? And I said, well, I charged you on a contract last year, and I'm trying to make that right. And he said, no, why are you here? And I'm looking at him like, I don't get what he's saying to me. He says, Mike, why are you here? Why are you telling me this? You didn't need to tell me that. I would have never known that. Why are you telling me this? And I started to cry. And this kid who tried to be so tough on the south side of Chicago. And I tried to walk around thinking I was cool, tried to be tough. You know, I mean, I remember thinking back of the cool people when I was growing up. I was talking to a friend of mine in AA the other day, and we were talking about all these iconic figures in my head about what manhood was, right? Had a little bit of mixture of Rocky Balboa and Fonzie, you know, all that kind of stuff, right? It's tough to pretend you're like that when you feel like Screech from Saved by the Bell on the inside. It's a very difficult thing to pull off. Okay? So, I'm crying in this guy's office. He said, Mike, you don't owe me anything. I said, no, I owe you this money. I don't have it all. I have $250 now. I get a commission check in 6 weeks. I'll give you the other 5. He said, Mike, I'm not taking your money. I said, no, I owe you. He said, let me tell you a story. So he proceeds to tell me this story. When he was a kid, him and his brother used to pick peas. And they had this basket on their hip. And they'd get into this rhythm. And when they dropped off by the farmer, they had to stay in the row. You either got a good row or a bad row. Hopefully you got a good row. Because the basket had to be filled up to a certain line for you to get a quarter. If it didn't fill up to the line, you didn't get a quarter. There's no 15-cent deal here. It's a quarter or bust. So he's picking peas, picking peas, picking peas. He said, I don't know, 200 yards down the road, there was some railroad tracks, and it kind of gullied down, and hobos would jump off the tracks over there and get shelter at the end of the day. And there were 2 bells that rang from the farmer. One with 15 minutes left to pick. The second one is the truck's leaving, and you're not getting back to the farmhouse unless you're in the truck. So when the first bell rings, you go to the truck. So I'm picking peas, and I'm going crazy, and I look down the way, and I see this hobo come out. He takes his hat off. He had a big hat on. He starts picking peas, and he puts them in his hat. And Joe says, I get all distracted on my, process here. And I'm thinking, go in another guy's row. Those are my peas. And he throws them off. The first bell rings. He looks down. He's not going to make his quarter. He's upset, very upset. So he starts picking like crazy to try to get as many as he could in there. Didn't make it. Finally, he's got to start getting back to the truck because when that thing leaves, he's walking. So he starts turning around. He walks back to the truck, and he hears, hey, kid. And Joe turns around, and it's this hobo. And he walks right up to Joe, and he takes his hat full of peas, and he dumps it in Joe's basket and fills it up to the line. Joe just looks at him, and the hobo pokes him in the chest. He said, remember that, kid. Somebody gave you a hat full of peas one day, and you didn't ask for it. And someday somebody's going to come knocking on your door, and they're going to need a hat full of peas, and you better give them one because somebody gave you one once. You know what I mean, Mike? No, I don't know what you mean. I'm nuts, He says, Mike, I'm giving you a hat full of peas. You can drop checks off here till the day you die. I'll never cash them because somebody gave me one once. He says, as a matter of fact, Mike, I'm looking for a salesman. I could use an honest guy like you to come work for me. He says, and if you don't want to be in the trucking business, that's fine, I get that. He said, but if you ever need a letter of reference, you call me, leave a message on the machine, I'll make sure my secretary writes it up and I'll sign it. You can pick it up anytime. We could use more men like you around this earth. I got to tell you, those experiences in step 9, when the miraculous happens and you're standing there and you're a part of it, it's impossible to deny the power of God. It's impossible. No one can tell me. No one can tell me that God didn't do that because I know what's supposed to happen. He's supposed to get on the phone and call my boss. She's supposed to deny that I told her, and they're supposed to sue our company, and I'm supposed to be blackballed from the career that I've started. That's what's supposed to happen. Not with God. Not with God. So he says, I got one more thing. He stands up and he comes around his desk. And he stands in front of me and I'm sobbing. And I'm a big guy. He's bigger. He said, stand up. And I stood up. And this man hugged me in his office. You know. And I'm hugging him, and I'm like, this is awesome. And then I'm thinking, I'm not sure this is awesome. And right after that, I thought, don't put snot on his tie. Don't put snot on his tie. Don't put snot on his tie. So he pulls me away, and he goes, one more thing. He pokes me in the chest. He said, you got a hatful of peas today, kid. And someday somebody's going to come knocking on your door, and they're going to need a hatful of peas, and you better give them one, because somebody gave you one once, and you didn't ask for it. And I'm like, thanks, Joe. He said, one more thing, and I want you to remember this. God is bigger than you, and he's bigger than me, and he sure the hell is bigger than $750. And I walked out of that office believing everything that Joe had promised me in a way that I never believed it before. My mother and I, as I said, we had this great distance between each other because of me, not because of her. Joe was very convinced that the problem in my family was not that my mother had faulted on her parental skills, but that she had a bad son. He was pretty convinced of that. She was not a bad mother, she had a bad son. That's how that worked in my relationship with Joe. He said, the problem is, kid, you don't know how to be a son. So we're going to teach you. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to pick up the phone and you're going to call your mother every weekend and you're going to say 2 questions to her. The first one is this. Hi, Ma, how'd your week go? And whatever it is that she answers, you're to say this. Wow, that sounds interesting. Could you tell me more about that? And I'm going, Joe, this is very Ward and June Cleaver. I mean, this is not what we do in my family. You know, I call, I can listen in her voice to how angry she is at me, but she's not saying it, and then I'm supposed to attack because I can sort of tell that she's mad, but she's not saying anything, and then she's going to yell back at me, and then I get to curse and scream and hang up the phone. That's how we communicate in our family. It's not our fault, we're Irish, blah, 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 and I go into all this stuff, right? So he says, nope, not anymore. Call her every week, you ask those 2 questions. He says, but early on, here's what's going to happen. She's not going to care what you have to say. She's going to think you're looking for money. Because didn't you tell me you used to break into her kitchen window? Take money out of her purse and booze out of her fridge and food out of her refrigerator? I said, yeah, I did that. I did that. He said, wasn't it funny she never locked the door? Wasn't it funny she never locked the window? You think she didn't know the money was gone? Wow. Never looked at it like that. I just thought I was pretty slick. I know, Mike, that's your problem. So I did that. I started calling my mom. And I started asking her those 2 questions. How'd your week go? Wow, that sounds interesting. Could you tell me more about that? Goofy thing happened after 2 months. I slowly began to care about the answers. Funny thing happened after 6 months. I deeply cared about the answers. I got to love my mom. And we had that relationship for 14 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. Until one day I got a call from my sister. And she said, Mom's going in the hospital. They're doing some kind of thing with her stomach. I don't really know what it is. I got to work, you know. And it just hit me wrong. I don't like this. So I call work and said, I'm taking a couple of days off. I'm going to Chicago. They did exploratory surgery the day I got into Chicago at the hospital. And she had stage 4 ovarian cancer. It was absolutely everywhere within her. And took 6 months. She went right into hospice right away. My mother was a strong lady, wonderful lady, nothing but respect for her. I'm traveling in Indianapolis for work, and I call her on the phone. It just hit me. I wonder if Mom's got anything on her plate that needs to be cleaned up. Because we were very clear. You know, we're a Catholic family, so we're talking about death and where she's going and how that's all going to work, and we're just open about it. And I call her up and I say, Ma, you got anything? We do this thing in AA. It's like an 8th and 9th step. I know you don't care about that, but if there's anything out there, I know you're bedridden, that you need cleaned up before you go home, man, I'd love to do that for you. No, I'm fine, son. No problem. Calls me up a month later from the hospice bed. She said, remember that thing we were talking about? I said, yeah. She's like, I got a little something I need you to do for me. I said, Mom, I'd be honored. So I came home, and my mother, on a torn off piece of magazine, had 2 names written down. 2 names. Now, my definition of an A-step is very similar to mine, which is like a roll of Bounty paper towel, rolled out. My sweet mother has 2 names. I said it would be a privilege. And I had the incredible honor because of you and what you told me about recovery, that it was step work. And meeting attendance and service and all the rest, but it was step work. I had the privilege of driving around the city of Chicago and finding 2 people for my mother who was in hospice. And I got to look them right in the eye and say, Anne Marie Donnelly wants to make this right. And I'm her son. And I get to do this. I sat in this one guy's office and we cried together about this experience. To be able to do that. And that was an incredible experience, but I got to tell you, that paled in comparison to walking back into that hospice room and handing my mother that little sheet of paper with 2 names crossed off. Peace, right over her. And you know what? They weren't that big a deal, from my perspective. But they were eating her lunch. They were eating her lunch. She died, she had a great devotion to Our Lady of Mount Carmel. So we're all around her bed. It's clear the end is coming. We're saying the rosary. She died smack dab in the middle of that rosary. We prayed 100 times together, right there. It was the most peaceful, beautiful thing I had ever seen in my life. Alcoholics Anonymous is more about what I do outside of a meeting than what I say inside of a meeting. It's more about the life that I live when none of you are around and I'm not pretending for you. When it's me and only me and God. How am I living my life? That's AA. And I was so blessed with a sponsor that taught me that. And the last thing I'll tell you that he told me was this, and then I'll close. He said, Mike, when we do your 4-step, because we went through the steps, and every time we did one, he said, you're not just doing this for you. You're doing this for every guy that you're going to sponsor after you get done doing it. And if you let yourself off the hook, you're going to let everybody else off the hook. God may keep you sober. I'm not saying he won't if you let you off the hook. And I don't know how many others he will. You better do this fully and to the best of your ability so that you can carry that message to other people, because that might kill them. He was so serious. I see now, after being around for a while, that it's a serious deal. I had a lot of friends die in Alcoholics Anonymous. The obituaries rarely say died of alcoholism. It's car accident, stroke, it's all these different things that we hear and we think, oh, that's what it is. I'm not saying I know better. I'm just saying. If I can leave us with anything, it's this. Because I really believe this to the depth of my soul because of Joe and because of the many people I've met around the country, because of fantastic sponsorship. And this gracious God who loves liars and thieves and adulterers and idolaters and all those things that we were worried that we really were. He still loves us. He still loves us. And he's got new life in store for us if we'll simply stop running and stop pretending and pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools that are laid at our feet. God bless you all. Have a good evening.
We hope you have enjoyed this recording. To obtain additional copies, receive a free catalog of AA and Al-Anon talks, or to find out about our tape and CD of the Month Club, call Encore Audio Archives at 1-800-878-1308, or visit our website at www.12steptapes.com.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down. And then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.